In the heart of the ancient world, between the rugged mountains of Iran and the fertile valleys of Mesopotamia, a civilization began to rise, one that would shape the destiny of empires for thousands of years. This was Persia, a land destined to become one of the most powerful and enduring civilizations in human history. But before the mighty kings of Persia ruled vast territories, before the grand palaces of Persepolis were carved into stone, the land was home to older civilizations, the Elamites. They thrived for centuries in what is now southwestern Iran, developing art, trade, and writing long before Cyrus the Great was ever born. Their cities, like Susa, would one day become central to the Persian story, the roots of an empire that would redefine what it meant to rule. Around the 9th century BC, waves of Indo-Iranian tribes began to move into this region. Among them were the Medes and the Persians, two closely related peoples who would come to dominate the Iranian plateau. The Medes established the first great Iranian kingdom, uniting the tribes and overthrowing the power of Assyria in the 7th century BC. Yet their rise was only the beginning, because among their allies was a young Persian prince named Cyrus, son of Cambyses, destined to be known as Cyrus the Great. Cyrus would do what few men in history have ever achieved: build an empire so vast and so stable that it would last for centuries, inspiring rulers from Alexander to the modern world. Around 550 BC, he rose in rebellion against the Medes and forged the Achaemenid Empire, the first true Persian empire. Under his rule, Persia became the largest empire the world had ever seen. From the Indus River to the Mediterranean Sea, his realm stretched across 3 continents. But what made Cyrus truly remarkable wasn't just his conquests, it was how he ruled. Unlike most conquerors of his time, he didn't destroy the lands he conquered. He respected local traditions, allowed exiled peoples to return to their homes, and is even mentioned in the Bible for freeing the Jews from Babylonian captivity. To many, Cyrus wasn't just a king, he was a liberator, a symbol of just rule and human rights centuries before such ideas had names. He laid the foundations of an empire that would thrive on diversity, tolerance, and efficiency. He established a system of satrapies, provinces ruled by governors loyal to the king, but given local autonomy. This model of governance would be copied by countless empires to come.
When Cyrus fell in battle in 530 BC, his son Cambyses continued his work, conquering Egypt and bringing the Nile under Persian control. But it was under Darius the Great, who came to power in 522 BC, that Persia would reach its golden age. Darius transformed the empire into a marvel of organization and innovation. He standardized currency, built royal roads for trade and communication, and established a postal system so efficient that messages could travel thousands of kilometers in just days. Under Darius, the empire wasn't just powerful, it was alive. The city of Persepolis, with its grand staircases, towering columns, and intricate carvings, became a symbol of Persian greatness, a place where art, architecture, and faith meant to honor the kings of kings. But Persia was not without its rivals. To the west, across the Aegean Sea, the Greeks watched the growing might of this Eastern empire with a mix of fear and fascination. Their worlds would soon collide and change the course of history forever. The Persian Empire stood as the most formidable power the ancient world had ever seen. But across the sea, a group of small, independent Greek city-states, Athens, Sparta, and others, were beginning to challenge the idea that Persia was unstoppable. What began as a rebellion in the distant province of Ionia would soon ignite one of the most legendary conflicts in history: the Greco-Persian Wars. Around 499 BC, the Ionian Greeks, tired of Persian rule, rose in revolt. They were crushed, but their pleas for help to mainland Greece sparked a chain reaction that would bring Persia and Greece into direct confrontation. Darius the Great, determined to teach the Greeks a lesson, sent his armies westward. In 490 BC, the Persians landed on the plains of Marathon. Facing them were a much smaller Athenian force, outnumbered, outmatched, but determined. Against all odds, the Athenians charged, broke the Persian lines, and sent them retreating to their ships. The world was stunned. The myth of Persian invincibility had been shattered by a city of free citizens fighting for their homeland. But Persia was far from defeated. A decade later, Darius's son, Xerxes I, assembled one of the greatest armies the ancient world had ever seen. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers from across the empire united under the banner of Persia. He built massive bridges across the Hellespont, carved roads through mountains, and advanced into Greece with unstoppable force.
In 480 BC, at a narrow mountain pass called Thermopylae, Xerxes met a small Spartan-led Greek force commanded by King Leonidas. For 3 days, the Greeks held back the Persian tide in one of history's most legendary last stands. Eventually, they were overwhelmed, but their sacrifice bought precious time for the rest of Greece to prepare. Later that same year, at the Battle of Salamis, the Persian navy was lured into a narrow strait where the smaller, faster Greek ships surrounded and destroyed them. It was a devastating blow. The following year, at Plataea, the Persian army suffered another defeat, and Xerxes retreated east. Though Persia remained a massive empire, its aura of absolute dominance was gone. The Greeks had proven that freedom and strategy could stand against sheer power. The Persian Wars became legend, a story of defiance that would echo for centuries. Yet within Persia itself, life went on. The empire remained vast and prosperous. Darius and Xerxes had built an administrative machine so strong that even military losses couldn't bring it down. Trade flourished, connecting India, Egypt, and the Mediterranean in a vast network of exchange. Gold coins stamped with the image of the Persian king circulated across continents. After Xerxes, however, the empire began to show signs of strain. Power struggles at court, assassinations, and rebellions became frequent. The later Achaemenid kings lacked the vision and authority of their predecessors. Corruption crept into the satrapies, and loyalty began to waver. By the mid-4th century BC, a new power was rising in the west, Macedonia, under the leadership of a young and ambitious king, Alexander the Great. When Alexander crossed into Asia Minor in 334 BC, he wasn't just invading an empire, he was setting out to destroy a legend. The Persians, led by King Darius III, tried to resist, but the tide of history was turning. Battle after battle, Alexander's disciplined armies crushed Persian forces at Granicus, at Issus, and finally at Gaugamela in 331 BC, where Darius's army was annihilated. The mighty Persian Empire, built by Cyrus and expanded by Darius and Xerxes, collapsed before the brilliance and ferocity of a 25-year-old king from the west. When Darius III was betrayed and killed by his own men, Alexander entered Persepolis, the heart of Persia, and burned its great palaces to the ground. Some say it was revenge for Xerxes' burning of Athens. Others say it was drunken rage. Whatever the reason, the flames that consumed Persepolis marked the end of an era. The Achaemenid Empire, the first great Persian empire, was no more. Yet the Persian spirit did not vanish. Even as Alexander marched east, the traditions, languages, and culture of Persia began to shape his empire in return. Greek and Persian worlds blended, their art, architecture, and governance interwoven in what historians called the Hellenistic Age. But Persia's story was far from over. Empires would rise and fall upon the same soil, and from the ashes of the Achaemenids, new dynasties would emerge to reclaim their heritage and redefine the meaning of Persia once again.
When Alexander the Great died suddenly in 323 BC, his empire, the largest the world had ever seen, was thrown into chaos. His generals, known as the Diadochi, divided the territories among themselves, each claiming a portion of his vast realm. Persia, the heart of the empire, fell under the control of Seleucus I Nicator, one of Alexander's trusted commanders. Thus began the Seleucid Empire, a hybrid of Greek and Persian traditions. For nearly 2 centuries, the Seleucids ruled Persia, bringing Greek language, art, and philosophy into Persian life. Magnificent cities were built, like Seleucia on the Tigris, modeled after Greek ideals, yet infused with Eastern grandeur. But beneath this surface of fusion, resentment brewed. The Persians had not forgotten who they were. They were heirs of Cyrus and Darius, not subjects of foreign kings. By the 3rd century BC, a powerful new force emerged from the northeastern frontiers, the Parthians, a nomadic people from the steppes of Central Asia. Skilled horse archers and fierce warriors, they began conquering Persian lands piece by piece. The Seleucids, weakened by constant wars with rival Hellenistic kingdoms, could not resist them. Around 247 BC, Arsaces I established the Parthian Empire, marking the return of Persian rule. Under the Arsacid dynasty, Persia transformed again. No longer centralized like the Achaemenids, but a federation of noble families bound by loyalty to the Parthian king. They mastered a balance between Persian tradition and Greek influence, creating a culture uniquely their own. Their capital, Ctesiphon, became one of the greatest cities in the ancient world, a center of wealth, art, and power. The Parthians soon faced their greatest rival, Rome. From the west, Roman legions pushed into the east, hungry for conquest and glory. The clash between Rome and Persia became one of history's longest and most enduring rivalries. In 53 BC, the Roman general Crassus invaded Parthia, confident of an easy victory. But at the Battle of Carrhae, the Parthian cavalry annihilated the Roman legions, humiliating the might of Rome. Crassus was killed, and his defeat became legendary. For centuries, neither side would achieve complete dominance. Rome had the infantry, Persia the horse archers. Between them lay a frontier soaked in blood and ambition. Yet while the Parthians were powerful, their loose confederation made them fragile. Local nobles often acted independently, and succession crises were frequent. In time, internal decay set in, and from within their own empire, a new dynasty rose to challenge them. In 224 AD, a Persian noble named Ardashir I overthrew the last Parthian king and established the Sassanian Empire, the last great pre-Islamic Persian dynasty. With the Sassanians, Persia was reborn once more, strong, centralized, and proudly Zoroastrian. Ardashir claimed to restore the glory of Cyrus and Darius, declaring that the divine fire of Persia had been reignited. Under his successors, especially Shapur I, the Sassanian Empire reached new heights. Shapur captured the Roman Emperor Valerian in battle, an unprecedented humiliation for Rome. He expanded Persian power deep into Mesopotamia and beyond, asserting Persia's dominance in the east. The Sassanian world was magnificent. Cities like Ctesiphon gleamed with palaces and domes, their walls covered with intricate carvings and brilliant mosaics. Zoroastrian fire temples burned across the empire, symbolizing purity and divine truth. Persian art and architecture flourished, influencing everything from Byzantine designs to early Islamic culture.
For 4 centuries, the Sassanians and the Romans, later the Byzantines, fought endless wars, shaping the map of the ancient world. Neither could destroy the other completely, though each tried. Persia became the great equal of Rome, a superpower that defined the East as Rome defined the West.
However, as the 7th century dawned, exhaustion set in. After decades of brutal warfare with the Byzantines, both empires were weakened, drained of men and money. And from the deserts of Arabia, a new force was rising, one that would change not just Persia, but the entire world. The year was 633 AD. From the scorching deserts of Arabia came warriors united under a new faith, Islam. The Arab armies, inspired by their belief in one God, swept across the ancient world with stunning speed. Both the Byzantine and Sassanian empires, exhausted from decades of war, found themselves unprepared for what was to come. In 636 AD, at the Battle of Al-Qadisiyah, the Persian army of Yazdegerd III faced the Arab forces. Despite their vast empire and long tradition of warfare, the Persians were decisively defeated. By 651 AD, the last Sassanian emperor was killed, and the mighty Persian Empire, which had stood for over 1,000 years in various forms, fell to the new Islamic Caliphate. But the Persians did not disappear. Empires can be conquered, but civilizations endure. What followed was not the end of Persia, but its transformation. Under the early Islamic caliphates, Persian scholars, scientists, and administrators became indispensable. The Persians, with their long tradition of bureaucracy and learning, helped build the foundations of the Islamic Golden Age. The Arabic script replaced Pahlavi, but Persian culture continued to flow beneath the surface, influencing art, literature, and governance across the Islamic world. By the 9th and 10th centuries, Persian identity re-emerged more clearly. The Abbasid Caliphate, though centered in Baghdad, became increasingly Persian in its administration and culture. Persian viziers and poets filled the courts, and the Persian language itself was reborn, now written in Arabic script but preserving its soul. This was the age of Ferdowsi, the great poet who would gift Persia its national epic, the Shahnameh, the Book of Kings. Written around 1000 AD, the Shahnameh told the entire history of Persia, from its mythical beginnings to the fall of the Sassanians. It wasn't just a poem, it was a declaration of identity. It reminded every Persian that though conquered, they were never broken. Ferdowsi's words would echo for 1,000 years, keeping alive the spirit of the ancient kings. At the same time, Persian dynasties began to rise once again under Islamic rule. The Samanids in the northeast, based in Bukhara, were among the first to promote Persian language and culture within an Islamic framework. They sponsored art, literature, and science, turning their cities into centers of learning that rivaled Baghdad and Cairo.
The following centuries saw waves of conquest and change. The Seljuks, a powerful Turkic dynasty, swept across the region in the 11th century. Though they were Turkic by origin, they adopted Persian culture and governance completely. Persian became the language of administration and poetry, while Arabic remained the language of religion. This blend, Islamic in faith, Persian in culture, became the backbone of medieval Central Asia and the Middle East. The Seljuk era brought a flourishing of science, philosophy, and architecture. Cities like Isfahan, with its grand mosques and intricate tilework, became symbols of Islamic Persian glory. It was also during this time that Omar Khayyam, the poet, mathematician, and astronomer, wrote his immortal verses, celebrating life, fate, and the fleeting nature of time. His quatrains would one day inspire the world far beyond Persia's borders. But even the most glorious ages end. From the east, a storm unlike any before was brewing, a force that would leave much of Persia in ashes. The 13th century dawned with a shadow stretching across the steppes of Central Asia. In 1219 AD, the world would witness one of the most catastrophic invasions in human history, the Mongol conquest under Genghis Khan. Persia, with its fertile lands, thriving cities, and rich cultural heritage, became a prime target. The Mongols were unlike any previous invaders. They were nomadic, ruthless, and unmatched in mobility. Their armies swept across Juarez, Bukhara, and Khorasan, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. Cities were razed, crops destroyed, and irrigation systems, some dating back to the days of Darius and Xerxes, were obliterated. The consequences were catastrophic. Urban life collapsed in many regions, agriculture suffered for decades, and population losses were enormous. Scholars estimate that up to 30% of Persia's population perished during the Mongol invasions. Yet in the chaos, a new synthesis emerged. The Mongols, initially foreign rulers, gradually adopted Persian administrative techniques, Islamic culture, and even patronized arts and learning. Under the Ilkhanate, Persia slowly recovered. Trade routes were restored, cities rebuilt, and Persian culture continued to flourish, albeit under Mongol rule. By the late 14th century, a new force appeared in Persia, one as fearsome as the Mongols, but even more brutal. Timur, or Tamerlane the Lame, from his base in Samarkand, launched campaigns across Persia, Central Asia, and even India. His conquests were characterized by extreme violence. Estimates suggest his campaigns may have killed up to 17 million people, reshaping the demographic and political landscape of the region. Cities were razed, and entire populations were enslaved. Yet, paradoxically, Timur was a great patron of art, architecture, and learning. Samarkand became a center of culture, drawing artists, scholars, and architects from across the world.
After Timur's death, Persia gradually stabilized under smaller dynasties until the rise of the Safavid Empire in 1501 AD. Founded by Shah Ismail I, the Safavids reasserted Persian identity and consolidated control over modern-day Iran. For the first time in centuries, Persia was unified under a distinctly Iranian Shia Muslim state. Shah Ismail's rise marked the beginning of Shia Islam as the dominant faith in Iran, a defining feature that persists to this day. The Safavids faced constant challenges, most notably from the Ottoman Empire to the west. The rivalry was fierce, often erupting into full-scale wars over territory in Mesopotamia, the Caucasus, and eastern Anatolia. Despite these conflicts, the Safavids fostered a golden age of Persian culture. Under rulers like Shah Abbas I, the empire modernized its military, strengthened its economy, and developed cities like Isfahan, which became a jewel of Persian architecture and culture. Persian carpets, intricate textiles, miniature painting, poetry, and philosophy flourished. Trade with Europe expanded, especially with the Dutch and English, who sought Persian silk, carpets, and spices. Shah Abbas's military and administrative reforms made Persia a formidable state, able to project power regionally, despite the threats from both Ottomans and Uzbeks. However, no empire lasts forever. After Shah Abbas, the Safavid rulers became increasingly decadent, focusing more on luxury and courtly pleasures than governance. This decline made Persia vulnerable to foreign powers, particularly Russia and the Ottoman Empire. By the 18th century, Persia faced invasions, internal rebellions, and a fractured political landscape. Amid this chaos, Nader Shah emerged as a military genius,
restoring Persian power temporarily in the mid-18th century. He reconquered lost territories, including parts of the Caucasus and Mesopotamia, and even sacked Delhi, bringing immense wealth back to Persia. Yet Nader Shah's reign ended in paranoia and assassination, plunging Persia once again into instability. The Qajar dynasty, founded in 1796, attempted to stabilize Persia, but the country increasingly fell under the influence of foreign powers. Russia and Britain vied for control over Persian lands, especially in the Caucasus and Central Asia. Treaties and wars during the 19th century forced Persia to cede territory, leaving the once mighty empire diminished but culturally resilient. Despite these challenges, Persian culture endured. Literature, poetry, architecture, and intellectual traditions remained vibrant. Figures like Saadi, Hafez, and Rumi continued to inspire generations worldwide, proving that while empires may fall, culture persists. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, Persia faced a new era of foreign interference and internal struggle. The once mighty empire, weakened by centuries of invasions, dynastic decline, and territorial losses, became a chessboard for colonial ambitions. Russia advanced from the north, while Britain, controlling India, expanded influence from the south. Persia's strategic location, rich natural resources, and potential as a trade corridor made it a prize for both powers.
The discovery of oil in 1908 in Musjed Suleiman transformed Persia's strategic value dramatically. Western powers, particularly Britain, gained a vested interest in controlling Persian resources. At the same time, internal dissatisfaction grew. Revolts from 1905 to 1911 demanded modernization, constitutional reform, and the end of absolute monarchy. These pressures birthed the Persian Constitutional Revolution, which aimed to limit the powers of the Shah and create a parliament. Though partially successful, the country remained deeply vulnerable to external manipulation. The Anglo-Russian Convention of 1907 starkly illustrated Persia's diminished autonomy. Without Persian consent, Britain and Russia divided the country into zones of influence, the north under Russian sway, the south under British control, and a small neutral zone in between. Persian sovereignty was undermined, leaving local rulers dependent on foreign support. In 1921, a military officer, Reza Khan, capitalized on this instability. Backed by Britain, he staged a coup, eventually founding the Pahlavi dynasty in 1925. Reza Shah sought to modernize Persia aggressively. Railroads, schools, and industrial infrastructure were built, and the army was strengthened. He implemented secular reforms, curtailed the power of the clergy, and sought to westernize society through changes in clothing, education, and law. However, his authoritarian methods and disregard for traditional elites created tension and resentment. During World War II, Persia's strategic importance as a supply route for the Soviet Union under the Lend-Lease Agreement drew the attention of both Britain and the USSR. In 1941, fearing Axis influence, Allied forces occupied Persia. Reza Shah was forced to abdicate in favor of his son, Mohammad Reza Shah Pahlavi. The young Shah inherited a nation modernized in infrastructure, but still politically fragile. In the post-war era, Persia faced growing nationalist sentiment. Prime Minister Mohammad Mossadegh emerged as a symbol of independence, championing the nationalization of the British-controlled oil industry in 1951. This bold move provoked a crisis with Britain and the West. In 1953, Mossadegh was overthrown in a CIA and MI6-backed coup, restoring the Shah's power and leaving a lasting legacy of foreign interference in Iranian politics. During the 1960s and 1970s, the Shah used oil wealth to modernize the economy, develop infrastructure, and build a powerful military. Yet his regime became increasingly authoritarian, suppressing dissent and alienating the majority Muslim population through aggressive secular policies and perceived westernization. This tension erupted in 1979 with the Islamic Revolution led by Ayatollah Khomeini, which overthrew the Pahlavi monarchy. Persia, now officially Iran, was transformed into an Islamic republic. The revolution was marked by a complete rejection of Western influence, secular governance, and the monarchy. Communist groups that had supported the revolution were quickly purged, establishing a theocratic state with deep roots in Shia Islam. Immediately after the revolution, Iran's relationship with the West deteriorated sharply, culminating in the 1979 to 1981 hostage crisis at the U.S. Embassy in Tehran. The revolution also inspired regional tensions. In 1980, Iraq, under Saddam Hussein, invaded Iran, hoping to exploit its internal chaos. The Iran-Iraq War lasted 8 brutal years, costing hundreds of thousands of lives and devastating the economy. Despite international involvement and support for Iraq from the US, USSR, and Arab states, Iran resisted, solidifying its identity as a revolutionary state. In the decades since, Iran has navigated a complex geopolitical landscape. The country remains under Western sanctions due to its nuclear program, while simultaneously extending influence throughout the Middle East, in Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Yemen. Iran has strengthened ties with Russia and China, joining organizations like BRICS and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization to counterbalance Western power. Today, Iran reflects the culmination of millennia of history. From the ancient Achaemenid Empire to the modern Islamic Republic, Persian civilization has endured invasions, dynastic changes, foreign occupation, and internal revolutions. It has contributed enormously to world culture, science, governance, and the arts. Its language, literature, architecture, and intellectual traditions continue to shape the region and influence the world. Persia's history teaches that empires may rise and fall, borders may shift, and rulers may come and go, but culture and identity have a remarkable endurance that shapes the course of history long after armies and dynasties have vanished.